It was a plantation in the middle of cotton fields in Arkansas. We did everything to maintain the property, us girls did. We weren't allowed to wear open-toed shoes in the training centers because apparently Bill Gothard has a foot fetish.
Oh my goodness.
He said that open-toed shoes can cause men to stumble, especially if the toenails are painted. Bill. We were all lined up like in our khaki and polo shirts in his office, and he was like, what a group of fine young women. Just good looking, fine young women. You're going to make great wives. Just like literally looking us up and down like cattle.
Girl.
Yeah.
So much.
This is trafficking. This is labor trafficking. This is child abuse.
Hey, my name is Shelise Ansola, and this is Cults to Consciousness, where we discuss leaving high-demand religions and organizations and finding healing and independence through awareness and true individual sovereignty. As always, if you're only listening and you want to see our faces, go to our YouTube channel at Cults to Consciousness, where you can like and subscribe. We are so close to 60,000 subscribers/supporters. Thank you so much, you guys, for joining me in this journey, for supporting these guests who come on and bravely tell their stories. It's not easy to do. So when you hit that subscribe button, when you hit that like button, when you comment your words of encouragement, it not only means a lot to me, it means a lot to the guests, and it tells the algorithm that you want other people to hear this story. So much appreciated. Social media is super powerful. I was actually given this person's story by someone on Instagram. They sent me one of her TikToks and I checked it out. It was right during the Shiny Happy People debut. She got over 1 million views on her video talking about her experience in the IBLP, which is the Institute in Basic Life Principles run by Bill Gothard. We'll get into all of that. But until then, thank you so much for joining us, Jess.
Hi. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm so glad we finally were able to connect. You've talked about your story a little bit on TikTok, which has been a lot for you, right? I mean, how has it been having one of your videos just totally blow up and have all this attention coming at you from multiple places?
I was honestly really surprised. I did not expect it to get the kind of reaction that it did. 1.2 million views, honestly.
Oh my gosh.
And there's still the comments and likes and views on that one video are still coming in. It's been up for 3 weeks now. And I can't believe it.
Yeah. It's pretty amazing. And I think what stood out to people is just the outright child abuse and the child labor that was forced on you that everyone is just in shock by. So I want to get into that. But first, just to give people a basic understanding who aren't familiar with the IBLP or Shiny Happy People, the documentary, a few broad strokes I would say are: it was created by Bill Gothard, this guy who, funnily enough, was never married, but he decided to tell people how to get married and raise children. And a lot of these principles were very damaging and abusive just by nature. And what happens is these people take these principles and they go to the extreme. For example, if you are abused as a woman, it is considered your fault, but you should also be thankful because God gave you that spiritual lesson and now you're more spiritual by it. So go thank your abuser. Really, really awful stuff here that just perpetuates this cycle of abuse within families. And one of the lines from the documentary, and we mentioned this in our episode with Emily, it turns every father into a cult leader and every family into an island. So they use these tactics of isolation to shut people off from mainstream society. They don't really want you to watch television, participate in any, quote, worldly things. You have to dress very modestly. You're forced to dress modestly because you're meant to be shamed as a woman for causing these men to think impure thoughts, which is just, it drives me crazy. So I could go on for days. We're not here for that. If you want to dive more into the specifics of IBLP, definitely check out some of our previous episodes, which we will definitely link. But let's get into you, Jess. So you were raised in this way because your mom actually went to these seminars as a teenager, right?
She started attending in the 70s. At that point, he was selling out stadiums for this seminar on the basic principles of life that he came up with based on the ideology of the 1950s household. You see it portrayed in the media. Well, that's what he took and said, oh, well, this is obviously what God intended. And he created an entire cult around that ideology.
Yeah, and that's perfectly put. He really just, he wanted a world where women were under men. That's like another big principle of it, the umbrella system. Men are under God, and then the woman is under the man, and the children is under the man and the mother, basically. And so
Right.
it's this sense of control and authoritarianism, and it's, yeah, I don't like it. I don't even know what else to say about it. It's just, it doesn't sit well with me, but it is very much so this perfect 1950s housewife situation, and they want the quote traditional family values, which if that is your thing, I'm not knocking it. Please, if that's what you want to do that. What I don't like is when people are forced to live this way and they feel like they don't have an option and there is no equality.
Well, when you're taught that it is a sin against God and your husband or your father to step outside of those parameters, it creates such a harsh environment of hopelessness, I think, for a lot of the women involved.
Yeah.
All individuality was discouraged from both the males and the females in the group. People of color that joined were expected to whitewash themselves and conform to, like, for example, like white standards of hair and things like that. Women were encouraged to have soft curls. Literally, this was in our handbook, soft curls, flattering minimal makeup. See, that we are different from the other conservative cults in that the women were encouraged to wear makeup in order to make themselves look nice for their husbands, or so that they looked pleasant while serving the Lord.
Oh my gosh.
But with that, obviously came like super strict dress codes. I knew families where when the younger brother saw their own sister's ankles for the first time, they were shocked because they did not know women had ankles. Such was the modesty culture.
What?
Yeah. Within their own families. Yeah.
That is extreme. So did you have siblings growing up?
I had one sister. We're 6 years apart. We were definitely in the minority for there to only be 2 children in the family.
Yeah.
It was courage, the quiverful movement. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but have as many children as you can because they're like arrows in the hand of a mighty man. So my mother experienced a lot of shame of only having 2.
Oh, no. Do you mind sharing? Yeah. Was it because she wasn't able to, or she just decided against it?
She was not able to have children. My sister and I were both adopted. And I was adopted at 6 years old. I had been in the foster care system, and my sister was adopted at birth. So
okay.
She wanted more children, but my father and her split up right before she put us into the program. So
okay. Actually, did you ever have conversations with your mother about this? Because I'm sure a lot of people are wondering, and I've seen this in the comments before, people asking what happens when you're part of a religion or a group that puts your entire worth on having children and you're not able to, and what that does to the psychology of the woman that can't bear children. Did you ever have those conversations with her?
My mother shed many, many tears over not being able to have more children. And my father went on to have a son with his girlfriend, affair partner. And she, to this day, does not accept that that's actually his child. She doesn't believe it because they couldn't have children. So she was never able to mentally process him having a child with someone else. She wanted more children so badly.
It's really sad that they put that pressure on women. It's not okay. So when you said 13 is when you started getting into these training programs,
14.
right? Or 14, going to these training centers. Actually, before we get into that, what was life like for you at home before you were sent to these training centers?
In a word, miserable. My mother was an extremely controlling woman under the guise of children, honor your mother and father, for this is the way of the Lord, and all the conservative teachings that she was buying into. Since there wasn't a father in the home, she took that patriarchal ideology and transferred it to herself. When I left to go to the training center, which was for troubled girls, I actually experienced more freedom in that setting than I was having at home.
Oh.
I wasn't allowed to have friends. I wasn't allowed to interact with people my own age. I wasn't allowed to choose my own clothing, my own hairstyle. I wasn't allowed to eat what I wanted. Every single aspect of my life was controlled.
Wow. So that seems
Yeah.
actually even more extreme than what I've currently been exposed to as far as IBLP principles. Would you say that it's a fair assessment that she went to the extreme with these things, or were those teachings that I just have not been aware of yet?
She was extreme, but she was not alone. She was not alone. And that's what fuels the fire. When you are surrounded by people that are like-minded and who justify it, that's what makes, you know, she had grown up in these teachings of, you know, the umbrella, the layers of submission and all this other stuff. And, you know, to put it bluntly, my mother's a very manipulative human being. And this was a tool that she utilized incredibly effectively. She is a master with guilt.
Okay. Wow. I can't even imagine how hard that must have been for you, not having any sort of self-sovereignty and making any choices for yourself. So I'm really curious then to hear about your time in the training centers, because as you mentioned in your TikToks, it was pretty horrendous, but you're saying now that it was actually better than being home. So I'm really curious to hear that mentality, especially from a perspective that you have now, being able to look back at all three scenarios and be like, maybe that wasn't okay. Maybe everything just was not great for me.
You know, I look back on my whole life and I'm just like, wow, none of this has been awesome.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think when I got to the training center, the first thing that they did to me was tell me that I wasn't allowed to speak to anyone.
Oh, geez.
And yeah, that was incredibly dehumanizing. I'm a very social person. I thrive off of interaction with other people. I was extremely alienated at home. And so then to go there and be surrounded by people within my age group for the first time ever, and then immediately being told you're not allowed to speak, that was where most of my punishments came from, was me speaking out of turn because I was just desperate for human company.
Oh, wow. And you mentioned that you went to this center because you were a, quote, troubled youth. Would you mind telling everybody what it was that you were so troubled with?
I had a crush on a boy at age 13.
Uh-oh.
And had made the mistake of getting caught being vaguely flirtatious, as in I was caught talking to him. So that was a big no. And I was caught listening to the top 40 pop station out of Atlanta, Star 94.1. I wanted to wear navy blue nail polish. That was a huge issue.
Oh.
I had just started wearing makeup, and as you can see, I like the darker vibe a little bit. And I've been that way since I was young, and I was, you know, that was a huge no. And this is a little bit graphic. This is very like out there, but my mother had this weird obsession with all things sexually oriented and protecting us, but she somehow got it in her mind that I was operating outside of those boundaries and doing sexual things somehow, even though I never left my house. It was a very bizarre thing. And so she decided that at age 14, when I hadn't even kissed a boy, that I was somehow doing sexually deviant things. Oh. And that was she called my grandmother. She called my father. She told everyone.
Oh my gosh.
She told the prayer chain. Like, this was a huge thing. Like, she literally became convinced that I was wearing her lingerie when she wasn't home for personal reasons. It was incredibly bizarre. Wow. That's something I did not share on TikTok because the algorithm doesn't like those things.
Oh my gosh, that's a lot. How did that make you feel? Like, where is she getting this information from? Was she just super paranoid, or like she didn't actually catch you doing anything, right? So I don't understand.
Because of my history in foster care, She had decided that I had been abused, that there was no way I had not been abused. And so therefore, those parts of me would be open at a young age when they shouldn't be. I mean, at one point, she accused me of sleeping with my cousin. I was 11 years old.
Oh my gosh.
My cousin. Yes. This is like, it is truly psychotic. Like,
Wow.
I don't know any other word for it. So she genuinely believed all of these things despite having no evidence and me begging, pleading, crying, telling her it wasn't true.
Yeah.
And while all this was going on, she was also a very physically abusive woman in the name of discipline and God, you know. So there was a lot at play. But I think what it came down to is that I would not bend to her will. Like I would talk back kind of thing, you know, because these rules and things, all this stuff didn't make sense to me. And I would express that, and I would get in trouble time and time again for not submitting, for not honoring my mother. And that's really what it boiled down to. And I think everything that surrounded that was her just trying to justify her abuse towards me.
Yeah. Ugh, when I was watching Shiny Happy People and they were talking about the blanket training or the book How to Train Up a Child by Michael Pearl, right? Shelley Pearl?
Yeah.
Did
that's
she
on
follow?
her bookshelf.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. So that was a big part of the way that she disciplined then, was following that book?
Yeah, she was spanking my sister when she was, 6 months old.
Oh.
So she didn't have me until I was 6,
Yeah.
but the physical corporal punishment and abuse started within 6 to 7 months of me being permanently placed in their home.
Oh my gosh. Oh, I'm so sorry that you went through that. That's just, it's not okay. And I know that you know that, but sometimes I just like to tell people again that it's just everything that you experienced was not okay. And I'm so happy that you're feeling courageous enough to speak up about it now, because really this thing is sweeping the United States right now. Everyone is getting this huge wake-up call when they're realizing that what happened to them was not okay, and that most of this was led by this cult leader or influenced by him in some way, shape, or form. You see it throughout a lot of the evangelical Christianity, and I have to thank you for sharing that and being vulnerable, because I know that people watching this, there will be people out there watching this who can relate to your story, and it makes people feel less alone when you're willing to share. So thank you.
Well, that's the whole point behind it, was giving exposure to what it looked like as being someone that grew up in it. My entire teen years were spent in and out of these training centers and in this program. And my formative years were based on all these teachings.
Yeah.
And these are people that on the outside, look like happy families, but there is so much abuse going on behind closed doors. Like, it is just mind blowing. The amount of people I know that I'm in contact with who experienced horrific abuse at the hands of their parents because of the children must submit to their parents' teachings, which were by and large let out and rolled out by Bill Gothard.
Yeah, it really is awful. And I want to get to now your teen years so that we can get a broader scope of what actually went on in these training centers and understand that it's not just the parents in the home that are perpetuating this abuse, but it's these leaders, these church leaders, where these kids pay to go, and whether it's they pay to go because they want to be top of the class, like Jen, for example, she said, I was the poster child for IBLP, I did everything right, or sending these kids who are, quote, troubled. And I also want to mention we're doing an episode with Davy Jackson, and he was sent as a troubled youth to one of these centers. But he just told me on the phone today that they're sending kids who are actual juvenile delinquents. So you have this range of kids who are together in this center, and I can just imagine all of the issues that would cause.
Well, I think that the fact that there were actual juvenile delinquents involved was part of the reason that they did not allow us to speak to each other, because they didn't want the really bad kids to infect the sort of bad kids, was kind of the thing behind it. Because I know that the 2 different times I was involved with the girls program, there were a couple of girls there that had been in trouble with the law. Now, mind you, they are beautiful, sweet women now. And, you know, knowing them, their issues with the law were more like them trying to run away from home to escape the abuse and the law being called on them. And then this happens, you know, very rarely was it actual like criminal behavior.
I'm glad that you mentioned that. So when you first get to one of these places, so you were in and out of them throughout your teenage years, but let's start with the first one when you were sent away. Paint us a picture of what it's like when you show up and you're ready to get to work, I guess, as they would say.
So when you initially show up, you know, you roll up, all of the campuses for IBLP are beautiful. They're beautifully well decorated inside. They're well landscaped. You know, appearance is incredibly huge to the organization. So you walk in, you're greeted by the couple that is the directors for the training center. And then you are sat down to watch videos about the principles that they will be teaching. You know, my dad was the one that dropped me off. Like, we made a road trip out of it. I don't think he had really any idea where he was taking me. They sat down, they had him watching, you know, 2 or 3 hours worth of videos, me watching 2 or 3 hours worth of videos, essentially just kind of like indoctrination, propaganda. Like, I don't know how else to put it. A huge pastor that they were a fan of is S.M. Davis, and they used a ton of his sermons in family counseling, what they called counseling. And so after you arrive, you watch these videos, you meet the directors, you meet all the staff. And then, after my dad left, I was taken to a log cabin where I would be bunking with my quote unquote leader, who was a 19-year-old, and another girl and her leader. But I wasn't allowed to speak to anyone there. The first thing I was told, you were not allowed to talk. Then they went through everything I packed and brought with me. If it was music or book, they took it from me. If it was correspondence ability with anyone other than my mother or father, it was taken from me. If I had brought food or anything like that, it was taken from me. You know, my family had sent like some of my favorite sweets and comfort items with me. They took them. The director's wife ate them all and later was just like, oh, oops, I ate it. She was like, they just looked so good. I couldn't help myself. You don't mind, do you? So I was immediately put into that, and you start doing chores. It was a plantation in the middle of cotton fields in Arkansas. We did everything to maintain the property, us girls did. I mean, from mowing to weed eating, chainsaw work, stacking wood, clearing out brush. We had some farm animals that we had to take care of. I had to milk goats twice a day, and where they then tried to force us to drink the goat milk, but absolutely not. That's another reason I got in trouble, is because I wouldn't drink the goat milk. Yeah, so that's pretty much what it was. There was no actual education going on. Our only form of education was using the wisdom booklets, which is IBLP's kind of textbook situation, but they're not. It's subjects in school, but they are entirely based off of scripture and or great men of faith. So all the science pulled straight from Genesis.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
So we know how far that gets us. So before this, you were also homeschooled, right? So you had never actually been to a public school.
No. Well, I went to a year of pre-K before when I was in foster care, but other than that, no.
Right. So when you're using this, it's the Advanced Training Institute, right? ATI is the homeschooling program.
Yes.
When you're using this program, do you feel connected to the material? Do you feel like you're learning? Like, what's your level of spirituality going into this? So I kind of have an idea as to if you really agreed with it or not spiritually.
Well, I got saved at the age of 6.
Oh.
And so, you know, I had an incredibly traumatic start to life. So I was very, very much a people pleaser my whole, you know, before age 25. And so I threw myself into it. I bought into it. I memorized chapters and chapters out of the Bible. I studied Hebrew and Greek when I was, 13, 14, 15, trying to learn about the original languages of the Bible, buying versions of the Bible that were closer to the original stuff. I really threw myself into it because, one, I wanted to please my mother so badly because I was in an environment where I was never, ever good enough. And I was naturally gifted in school, so I learned everything very quickly. So my mother, to her credit, did do external math and stuff like that. But, even then my math education went as far as algebra, and then there was nothing beyond that. My biology book was a Christian-based textbook, so.
Right. That must have made things so much more difficult. So I can kind of empathize in a way of the people-pleasing thing, and very devout and reading my scriptures every night. And then I get told by a bishop that I'm the most unholy person and that I'm the scum of the earth and that I'm, just doing such a bad job, even though I'm still a virgin at 19, and feeling like really taking that in and feeling that and like in your gut, just believing all of it, because I wanted to do well. I wanted to make it to the highest level of heaven. I don't know if you know about Mormonism, but there are levels, and I was a grade A student, and I was like, I don't know, if there's 18 levels, I'm going to make it to 19. Like, that was my personality. So when I would get these harsh criticisms or feel like I had messed up, the guilt and the shame were so intense that it just ate me alive. And so were you feeling that way when you were sent to this place as a quote, troubled youth? Were you feeling like a failure? Were you like, what's going through your mind?
I did not really understand what I had done that was so horrible to get sent away. I just truly did not understand it. But I was like, well, there must be something terrible about me. So I really set out to try to fix whatever that was and do better, I guess. And I was around age 11, my mother started telling me that there was no way I was saved because I didn't act like Jesus. I didn't act godly. And then at age 13, I told her, all I feel is despair. All I feel is darkness. The only emotion I can feel is anger. And she told me that it was demonic. And so I had literally like a laying of hands exorcism. And so I was in this constant state of paranoia that I wasn't saved, that I was hellbound. I remember praying the salvation prayer daily, month after month after month. I got baptized again when I was 14, right before I went, because I was like, this is it. This time I'm actually saved. I'm really saved this time. And I literally remember sitting on the couch. I had to do something called a faith journal when I first showed up, which is you read through the entire Bible in 3 months and you write an essay on every book. And so I was doing this, and I just remember sitting there being like, I'm not really saved and I'm going to go to hell and none of this matters. And just praying over and over and over again, the salvation prayer, like compulsively.
Oh my gosh.
And, my mother told my whole family, like, I don't think she's really saved. No one would act like this if they truly knew Jesus, kind of thing. So it was a constant fear.
Wow. Did that let up at all when you were separated from that environment with your mother? When you went to the training centers, did you start to feel any differently about yourself?
Well, I kept getting in trouble there. And for just basic things like talking. Like one of the times later on, we were at one of their training centers in Texas, in Big Sandy, Texas. And I was 17 at this point. And someone in the group of girls that was from the training center that we were at overheard some guys, some boys, young men, 16, 17, saying that they thought I was pretty. So, I got in huge trouble for that. I never heard it. I was told that I was a Jezebel, that I was causing men to stumble. So I was put again on a no speak order. Wasn't allowed to speak the whole time I was there, and was literally told that you are going to cause men to stumble your whole life if you don't learn how to stop being a Jezebel. 17 years old,
Jess. Never
kissed a boy, had no idea of sensuality. Like, I was still such a tomboy. I had the life experience level of a 13-year-old. But here I was being told, like literally in tears, sobbing because I was going to cause so many men to fail in their lives.
Oh my gosh. the pressure that they put on these young girls. And you are beautiful. You're gorgeous. Look at you.
Thank
like,
you.
It's not your fault. Like, you're a beautiful woman. So, like, of course, men are going to comment on your appearance. But the fact that they put the blame on the woman is so wrong. And it just causes so much unnecessary shame. And it causes you to disconnect from your body and dissociate from your body and not want anything to do with it, which is so awful. And that's a huge part of deconstruction and going to therapy and figuring out who you want to be once you leave these cults, because you're so disconnected. You don't even know who self is. You don't know what to do with your body. Like, can I show it? What happens if I wear a dress? And it creates this fear over simple, basic things, even just with your biology, like women saying, or them telling women, your cleavage is causing men to sin. Well, God bless me with these breasts. I don't know what you want me to do with it other than wear a turtleneck at all times, which is it's not the woman's job to change the thoughts of men. It's just not okay. So, I mean, what are your thoughts on that before I move on?
I'm pretty sure Jesus said that if men's eyes are causing them to stumble, that they should gouge them out. And so I'm just going to roll with that. We weren't allowed to even wear like print on a t-shirt because it would draw attention. We weren't allowed to wear slits because it pointed up. We weren't allowed to wear open-toed shoes in the training centers because apparently Bill Gothard has a foot fetish.
Oh my goodness.
And he said that open-toed shoes can cause men to stumble, especially if the toenails are painted.
Bill, this guy.
Bill.
Like, I have to laugh, even though I know it is not, like, the things that he did are not okay. He should be in prison. I am not a fan of Bill, but like, if we don't laugh, sometimes we just have to cry because it's too much.
If I don't make fun of it, then I'm going to go insane.
Yeah.
More insane.
So did they ever tell you the reason behind the no speak order? What are they telling you is the purpose? Like, what are you supposed to gain by not being able to speak and ask for basic needs?
Breaking the rebellious spirit.
Oh, Lordy.
So if you were not a complete yes man, yes woman, like lay down doormat people pleaser, you were not in proper submission. And even though I was a people pleaser, even though I desperately wanted to make people around me happy, I have always been opinionated. And I've always had that strong personality. And even though on a base level, I agreed with all of the spiritual teachings and stuff, I've always had a really sarcastic sense of humor and that kind of thing. And it just didn't work for the environment.
So what would happen when you would speak? Because I saw in one of your videos just asking for food, right? They're like, no, you're going to be punished for that. Do you remember anything or any instances that really stand out to you when you were there being punished for speaking?
Before I was put into the solitary confinement, I was living in the cabin and I would get caught speaking when the leaders weren't around because I was like literally just starving for human company. Mm-hmm. And me and the other girl that were living in the cabin, we were considered to be in the discipleship program. And we would get caught speaking or whatever. Or I would be given, you have 5 minutes to take a shower and I would take too long. Things like that. And I would be given anywhere from 5 to 10 page long essays based off of scripture that outlined my rebellion.
You had to write these essays?
Yes. I was 14 years old. And I was given a Bible and a Strong's Concordance and the IBLP publication Character Sketches. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
No.
But it's like a coffee table book and they use animals to teach character qualities and characteristics, which honestly is a standalone book. It's not that bad, but they weaponized it, so it made it bad, Mm-hmm. Those would be my only resources. And I would have to write, like I said, 5-10 pages worth of it. And if I didn't finish it that night, more pages would be added on for the next night. So I literally went a week one time and I think I maybe slept 4 hours the whole week.
Oh no.
And so after being up, you would then have to get up, prepare breakfast for you and your whatever in your cabin, clean your cabin, and then you went to the main house to report for your chores, whatever that would be, taking care of the goats, doing yard work, stacking wood, whatever. And there was no nap time. There was no downtime. It was just work, work, work. And then go back to the cabin. No, you don't get to go to bed. You didn't finish your essay from last night. You have to do this.
Wow. You must have been just delirious because without sleep and writing these essays and doing manual labor, and you had mentioned you're in Arkansas, right? In this hot weather.
The heat.
Oh, wow. How long did that last, those essays?
I think there was like about a 2-week period. And then my leader, she got sick because she got so physically run down because she was having to stay up with me. So they were not letting her sleep either.
Wow.
And so she got so physically sick and run down. They were just kind of like, okay. I had extreme adrenal fatigue by the time I was 17. And I blame that time period.
Yeah.
I mean, the years coming up to it were traumatic, but the utter assault on my health while I was at Elms Plantation.
Yeah. What was the age range of people or children who were going to these and doing this manual labor? Because it seems like your parents had to pay for this, but you're also just working for free.
I think the youngest one there was 13, and the oldest one that was in the program would have been under 18, because once you were over 18, you couldn't technically be in the program. The leaders were people that had been through a program they had called Equip, which was specifically training teenagers to do this discipleship program with troubled youth. So I think our age range there was 13 to probably 23.
Wow. And they just had no problem putting these kids to work.
The only man on the property was the director's husband, and he was the one that oversaw all of it. Like, I remember one time I had a severe migraine, severe, like throwing up sick migraine. And I had thrown up, and they were like beating the bathroom door down, saying that I was just lying to get out of work, that I was just lying, that my mother had told them that I was a pathological liar, which was not true at all. And they thought I was lying, and I had flushed the toilet. I had thrown up again, like just a little bit. And he came in and he was like, she's lying. That's not even throw up in the toilet. She needs to get back to work. And I was literally sweeping the walkways of this place, dry heaving, because my migraine was so severe. But and he was like, well, when my wife has a migraine, she can't say anything. And you're sitting here arguing with me that you do have one. So clearly you don't.
Oh, no.
And that was the attitude. Yeah, that's just one incident that always really stood out.
Did they ever offer medical care for you guys?
There was a pregnant girl there who got medical care. And then as soon as she birthed the baby was taken away from her and sent to her parents. And she was left to grieve while she was in Arkansas.
That is just awful. And I want to clarify before anyone wants to jump in the comments and say, kids can do manual labor. Yes, of course. Like it's healthy if it's a healthy amount of manual labor, but not when these children are forced to do it all day, every day, not being taken care of, being punished in extreme ways. Like clearly there's a difference. I just had to put that disclaimer out because I feel like people might get the urge to comment something about it.
We were teenagers doing the outside work of a plantation and doing all of the inside work. So we cleaned the main house. Like it was a huge house, this plantation house, and this, it was also a pecan tree plantation. So when the pecans fell, we cracked them by hand. We would sit in circles, cracking them by hand, kind of like a quilting circle or a knitting circle. But we were cracking pecans that the training center would then sell for profit for the training center. Like another punishment they would use is you have to fill, 3-gallon Ziploc bags with shelled pecans.
Oh my gosh. It sounds very exploitative of children. I mean, it is very exploitative of children.
I'll tell you what's sad though, is I really did not have any concept of how bad it was till I posted this stuff on TikTok, and people in the comments were like, this is trafficking. This is labor trafficking. This is child abuse. And I said in one of my TikToks that it never occurred to me, because we were taught that once you became a teenager, you were an adult, because Jesus was talking with the leadership of the churches when he was 12, and, people begin all this stuff when they were teenagers, and that, teenagers should not have peers their own age. They should only associate with adults because they are pretty much adults now. And so the burden of responsibility placed on us as teenagers was never noticed because we were so indoctrinated that we were basically adults.
Wow. It sounds very much like Scientology. I think people have brought this up before in the comments too, where they don't really believe in children.
Yeah.
It's really frustrating when these cults, these high demand groups, take the childhoods of these poor kids. They just steal them away and expect them to do all these things or abuse them and just don't allow them to just be kids. And I'm honestly surprised that they don't advocate for child marriage, because I know that having babies is their number one goal. But it seems like you're not allowed to date until you're 16, right?
No dating was really allowed at all. It was strictly courtship. Like when you join the program, you have to sign a contract that you agree. It was 5 hours or less of television in the home a week. It could never be cable, could only be institute approved movies and media consumption. You had to agree to not go to movie theaters. Women had to agree to not wear pants unless it was a situation where it would compromise your physical safety. And they had family coordinators who were also usually between the ages of 19 and 25, whose sole job was to travel around their district and make sure the families were upholding these standards.
Whoa.
Yes, we had a lovely young woman named Crystal who was, I think, 23, who was in charge of all of our families to make sure we were following the rules.
Wait, so what would happen if you were caught not following the rules?
You would be reprimanded, given the opportunity to fix it. And if you didn't, you would be kicked out of the program.
Oh.
Which was also very expensive to be a part of.
Okay, that's actually a really interesting thing. And I want to get your take on this because I'm not aware of how it all works. So I know that Bill Gothard has these seminars and he has these programs. But when you say kicked out of the program, does that just mean you can't go to the seminars anymore, or you can't get access to the workbooks, the wisdom booklets? What does that mean exactly if you're kicked out?
If you're part of ATI, that means that you have access to all the conferences that take place at the different training centers all over the world, all over the United States. You would receive like discounts on attending the basic seminar and the advanced seminar and their couples counseling seminars, their financial freedom seminars, all these different things. The wisdom booklets, yes. The annual conference held in Knoxville, Tennessee. So you would lose access to all of those things. And generally, people involved in the program would be in churches, mostly independent Baptist churches, where everyone in the church was either in ATI or very closely aligned with the teachings. So to fall out of grace with the Institute would potentially alienate you from your entire church family and your entire social circle and remove all these quote unquote opportunities for your children.
Yeah. That makes sense. Just like with any cult, right? You demonize the outsider and you push them out. So people are so afraid to defect because even if they don't believe it anymore, if they leave, they're going to be ostracized by their family and friends. And who wants that?
Right.
So that makes sense. I'd like to get to your time at headquarters because you actually went up and spent time where Bill Gothard was, right?
Yes. So there's a little bit more that plays into this. The beginning of that was we traveled to Flint, Michigan. The Institute bought a 5-star hotel in Flint, Michigan that needed to be renovated into a training center. And it had to be done rapidly because there's a huge race, or there used to be up there, called the Crim. I can't remember what it stands for, but it was a very runners from all over the world came to it. So my 15-year-old self and all of us teenage girls involved, we rode in a 15-passenger van all the way to Flint, Michigan from Arkansas, and where we worked to prepare this rundown hotel to get it ready. We were working from 7 a.m. till about 10 p.m. every single day, cleaning. And I'm talking like, have you ever been to a site after construction's been done?
Yes.
It's that kind of cleaning, sun up to sundown, nonstop. And I did receive several disciplinary measures while I was there for, once again, talking, where I would have to stay up till midnight, 2, 3 a.m., literally scrubbing the walls and the stairwells.
Oh.
Or ironing. There's a lot of ironing. And then once the race showed up, us girls were the housekeeping team for the whole hotel. We had to clean these hotel rooms that these runners were using. I was 15 years old and being taught to clean a hotel bathroom in 7 minutes or less.
Oh my gosh.
So that we could get through floor after floor after floor. So we did that for a few weeks. And then we went back down to headquarters where we were then also again put to work, cleaning out the attic above Bill Gothard's office.
Right. So what was that like?
You know, honestly, at the time, we felt really special because we were at headquarters with Mr. Gothard. Like, wow. Like he, you know, and he just kept telling us what impressive young women we were and, you know, this, that, and the other. But we cleaned out like this massive area with all these books, and some of them were really old. Like we found an original print of the Pilgrim's Progress in this piles of books. I mean, I can't even imagine what that copy was worth. It was just chucked up in the attic with all the other donations and stuff like that. So we went through all of this stuff, all these antiques and stuff up in the attic, did a massive, massive clean out. And we were rewarded with expired Bath and Body Works lotion.
Oh my gosh, Jess.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
I'm a cucumber melon girly, and I was really excited for it.
Yes, for the cucumber melon. I remember those days. Oh my goodness. Well, I mean, that's probably a huge step up from what you've been getting, right? Because you were never rewarded in the past. So this was probably like, oh my gosh, we actually got something that we could have because all your possessions were taken away, right?
Yes, except for the things that were allowed. And at that point, we wore uniforms. Our uniforms were khaki skirts with no splits in them and polo shirt with the Elms Plantation logo on it. So we matched everywhere we went. Yeah, it was horrendous. So ugly. I
didn't even realize that you would have to scrub floors in skirts.
Oh yeah. We would wear pants sometimes when we were at Elms, like when we were doing like specifically heinous chores, like using the chainsaw or something like that. You know, you could wear pants because it was unsafe. But when we went to other training centers, we were not even allowed to pack a pair of pants.
Whoa.
It was very, very, and we were not allowed to mention at other training centers that we occasionally were allowed to wear pants at the one we were at.
Because you were breaking the rules.
Yes. One of the huge, huge concepts that they push is protecting the reputation of your authority figures, that they are God's tools and it is your job to protect their reputation by watching what you say. So, you know, mentioning that we were allowed to wear pants would potentially get the directors in trouble, and that was not protecting their reputation.
Right.
That's why abuse is so heavily covered in these circles.
Right. Everyone's just terrified to speak out because then they get punished for just mentioning something that is hurting them or that isn't right. I'm shocked that nobody noticed these 15-year-olds. Sorry, I'm backtracking. Nobody noticed the 15-year-olds who were cleaning the hotel rooms and been like, these look like children.
Well, you know, we were all in uniform and we were so well organized, and most people's perception was this is a little weird, but like we were taught to have the ministry smile. So everywhere you went, it was, hi, how are you? So good. So glad you're here.
Yeah.
You know, basically like servers in a restaurant, you know, that service personality, that service smile, having a servant's heart. And they literally called it, put your ministry smile on.
Oh.
We are here to be a witness for Christ to these people.
Yeah.
So that's what it was, you know. Yeah, we looked young, but we were so well organized and we seemed so happy.
Oh, that's the part that's so hard. And that's why we have to do these interviews, Jess, because same thing goes with other cults where, especially Mormonism, but they're so happy and look at their family and they're so well behaved, but there's so much going on under the surface that people don't know. And so that's why I just have to call it out. And that's not to say that there aren't genuinely happy people in these cults, because sometimes they are genuinely happy, or they just don't realize they're unhappy. That's a whole other thing. But I just think
that was me.
Really?
Yes, that was me, that not realizing how unhappy I was. I loved serving in the training centers. I loved it because I felt like I was a part of something. I felt like I fit in. I felt like I belonged. You know, I was a kid who came out of foster care and then whose adopted dad left 3 years after adopting me.
Yeah.
So like, I was so like thrilled to be part of something and I wanted to serve the Lord so much. Like, I was thrilled to be there and have these opportunities because I really thought I was doing something.
Yeah. I mean, it makes total sense, especially where you're just aiming to please, like you had mentioned before, where you just want to be accepted.
Yeah.
You want to be loved. You're not really getting that validation or that acceptance. And so any little breadcrumbs that come your way, you're just going to gobble them up and be grateful for them. And so, of course, it makes sense. And of course, you would react that way. What can you pinpoint now that you can look back at it, especially after your TikToks and hearing what people had to say? What is your understanding of what happened to you, and how are you dealing with the ramifications of that?
Realizing the level of exploitation that went on, you know, like I said, this is new for me. This has only been a discovery in the last 3 weeks for me but it put a lot of puzzle pieces together. It really like explained so much. Like, why were so many of the girls, women that I knew working there had completely shot out health by the time they were 25. And I didn't understand, you know, the impacts that it had on me. But looking back, I can put all these puzzle pieces together. You know, like, I have chronic fatigue now. It is never going to go away. You know, I can sleep 18 hours a day and I'm still exhausted. My adrenal glands were completely shot out by the time I was 17.
Yeah.
And those physical effects are never going to go away. And there were so many of us, but I never put the pieces together to that it was that exploitation of children, of the workforce, of the fact that we had all been groomed to please, and that our sole goal in life was to have a servant's heart.
Yeah.
And when that is preached to you over and over again, it really is grooming. It really is propaganda, whatever you want to call it. Like, you will exhaust yourself till you have nothing left trying to achieve that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Especially when you're raised in it, you just don't think to question it. And it's just part of your existence, part of your reality. If you're only recognizing 3 weeks ago and you've been out for how many years, it really does take a lot. It takes so much awareness, and it's hard. And I mean, I don't blame people if they don't even want to deconstruct, because it takes so much work to actually analyze your childhood and your life and go, oh yeah, that was wrong, because it starts to make you question reality itself. You start to go, wait, what are my own thoughts? What do I really think about something? What are my own morals? Do I have any? Are they only the program beliefs that I have of the past? It takes so much effort and therapy, right? I finally got a therapist. Yay, therapy. It takes a lot.
Every therapist I've gone to, I'm just like, you're not prepared. You're not equipped for this. I'm going to have to go. I appreciate your Instagram quotes, but I am so far beyond this. Like, thank you for your time.
Oh my gosh, that's so good. Just literally my last session with my therapist, I was explaining to her what garments were, which are the underwear that Mormons are forced to wear once they go through the temple. And it's like, I mean, talk about modesty and being so hot. You have these literal t-shirts and shorts that come down almost to your knee that you have to wear as underwear under your clothes. And the look on her face when she was like, sorry, what? And I was like, don't worry, I never had to do it. And she was like, but I'm confused. And like, she was just at a loss for words. And I'm just like blowing this person's mind. It's funny. But when you start to talk it out like we're doing now, things come up and you can laugh at it and you can cry with it and you can just kind of deconstruct finally what's been going on and what's been running in the background, the programs that have been continuously going that you don't even realize are connected to your past. I think that's usually the most shocking thing that people recognize. And they're like, oh, it was bad, and I didn't even realize it, just like you were saying.
You know, I knew it was bad, and I knew it was definitely a cult. I had decided that many years ago, there's a group called Recovering Grace where a lot of the former students have found a lot of healing there, and they are still very much faith-based. I have moved completely away from anything Christian faith-based. I think because, well, one, I struggled with my belief system for so long. There was always this lingering fear, like, well, what if I'm wrong?
Yeah.
What if I'm wrong? What if I actually went back after I got out? I went back because I was so convinced that I was living in sin. I was out for about 9 months and everything in my life fell apart during those 9 months because, I had zero real world experience. I had no ability to function around people that did not think exactly like I did because I had never been in that environment before. And so, through a series of events, I started living with this girl from a restaurant job who was absolutely insane. And I was exposed to more in 6-7 months than I had ever seen in my life. Just like, everything quote unquote worldly, I discovered in the space of about 6 months.
Oh no.
And, when I was 19. So I went back. I actually drove to Nashville where Bill Gothard was having a conference in their newest training center. And I talked with him and I was like, I really want to come back and work for the ministry. You have offered before, like headquarters job, whatever. Like I want to come back. And he's like, okay. He's like, well, will you get up and give your testimony today? So I got up with Bill Gothard in front of about 1,000 people, 1,000 young people, teenagers, and gave my testimony about how I had left. And then I was repenting and coming back. And then instead of going to work at headquarters, they shipped me off to their Northwoods in the Northwoods of Michigan training center to grow my faith and counsel me before I was ready for the public.
Oh, wow. What was that like?
Yeah. Honestly, well, the Northwoods of Michigan, I don't know if you've ever been there, but they are spectacular. It was just me and the couple that ran the place. They were in their 30s. They were really chill. I was working. I literally helped repaint a barn while I was there, But it was it was honestly a very relaxing time because no one else was around. So there was none of the pressure that you usually find in the training centers. Like we were in jeans,
wow.
Bill Gothard did come and visit. And we sat down to dinner with him, with the women in blue jeans. He was not happy, but we did it anyway. Yeah. The Northwoods Training Center was known for being a little bit of a wild card, but because it was just way out in the middle of nowhere. So they didn't get nearly as much scrutiny.
Yeah.
So yeah, I rode horses, painted barns, and then I went back to the girls' home in Oklahoma. It had moved from Arkansas to Oklahoma by this point and went back there. And spent several weeks there.
Okay, so I want to get into how you eventually left and get into the girls' home. But first, I have to ask what your impression of Bill Gothard was, because for those of you who don't know, he's kind of a creepy old man. And one of our guests, Emily, was part of a lawsuit against him because of the sexual harassment with these young girls. So I'm wondering what your impression was specifically of him.
Well, bear in mind, one, I'm not his type. I didn't have blonde, soft curls, and which seemed to be predominantly where his interest went. And I was also a little bit younger, but he was like, I spent quite a bit of time one-on-one with him over the years, like at conferences and stuff like that. Like he knew me, I knew him, he recognized me kind of thing. And he was a big fan of holding your hand and very extended eye contact, like just while holding your hands and doing the very emotional, yes, like just.
Yeah, that's creepy.
He also dyes his hair, so.
Yeah.
That's a little tidbit.
There was something that you said in your TikTok where he had all the girls line up after the attic thing and said something really creepy like, oh, wow, you're all going to make beautiful wives one day, right?
Yeah. We were all lined up like in our khaki and polo shirts in his office. And he was like, what a group of fine young women. Just good looking, fine young women. You're going to make great wives. Just like literally looking us up and down like cattle.
Oh, geez.
And we were all just like, oh my God, thank you. Well, we didn't say, oh my God.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean?
Of course.
So no, couldn't even say, oh my gosh. That was absolutely forbidden.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, but we weren't allowed to say, I can't think of what the word is, but we weren't allowed to say any derivatives of cuss words because they were the same thing.
Oh.
In fact, yeah, so no gosh, no darn, no heck, none of that.
What would you say?
Like the director of the training center I was at Elm, she used to say, oh, garden seed. But then she said she got convicted about that because it was basically the same thing as swearing and it expressed ungratefulness and discontent. So she was convicted of it. So she stopped.
Wow.
So you just weren't allowed to express frustration of any type.
Oh.
Every lick was to be taken with a smile and as a lesson to be learned.
I just don't even have words. You must have just felt so bottled up emotionally and just everything. I mean, okay, let's talk about the girls' center. And then at what point were you finally like, this is enough?
Well, I stayed at Elms initially for about 4 months, and then I went home. And when I went home, it was the beginning of the year. I went in August and I left in I think January, maybe. I'm not sure exactly. And my parents' divorce had just been finalized. It had been dragging on for 7 years.
Wow.
And yeah. Like I said, my mom, a lot. When I got home, I was miserable. She was worse to me than she was before. She continued to beat me, except it got a lot worse.
Oh, no.
Yeah. I mean, the weekend before she had sent me, we went to get family portraits done, and I had to wear a long sleeve shirt in the middle of summer because of how severely she had beat me the day before. I was covered in bruises, just head to toe. And so when I got back home, that same kind of behavior continued, but I had actually somewhat of a sense of self after having been away from her for 4 months that I did not have before, which was a huge problem for her.
Right.
Huge problem. She was like, I sent you there to make you a more submissive, less rebellious daughter, and you're worse, blah, blah, blah. Would you be acting this way there? And I literally looked at her and was like, no, I wouldn't be acting this way there because this wouldn't even be a point of contention.
Right.
So as soon as I turned 16, I left again for a program called Excel in Dallas, Texas.
Okay, so my timeline is all scawampus in my head.
I'm sorry, I'm all over the place.
No, you're fine. It's totally fine. I just want to make sure I'm getting this right. So you left at 14 and you went to a couple different centers. You ended up at headquarters. And then at some point when you were 19, you left all of it. And then you came back and then you were in the Michigan Center. And then... Okay, so where are we at now? Dallas. So that's closer to when you're 15 before you left, right?
So from 14 and 15, the 4 months that I was there, we traveled to Oklahoma City, Flint, Michigan, and Chicago, Illinois to work for the Institute during those 4 months, plus the work at the plantation. So that was when I was 14 to 15.
Okay.
I went to I was in those 4 different training centers. And then at 16, I was in Dallas, Texas for the Excel program, which it was only 2 months long. And then at 17, I was so desperate to escape home. I told my mother that I was feeling like just kind of like I wasn't like growing spiritually like I needed to. So I thought I needed to go back to one of the training centers to kind of get that boost. Like literally needed out of my house. It was horrific what was going on at home. And so I voluntarily went back into the girls' discipleship program to escape my home.
Wow. Okay. And then after that?
So I spent a year at Eagle Springs. By this point, they had moved to Oklahoma. So I spent a year there and we traveled to Texas and Oklahoma City and worked in training centers there. That was my senior year of high school. So I graduated, whatever, May 4th. And at the beginning of June, I left and went on an international trip for 6 weeks to Africa for mission work. And so when on that trip, I was around kids that had gone to public school for the first time in my life. I was around people that did not believe like I had been raised for the first time in my life. Yeah. By the time I got home, I was done. I was like, I want out. I came home in a sleeveless shirt. My mother started screaming about what a whore I was because I had on a sleeveless shirt, like literally jumped on top of me, pushed me down on the bed and held me down, screaming at me that I was a whore. I had never kissed a boy. No, I did kiss a boy. I kissed a boy in Africa. One of the members of our missions group. But I was still a virgin. I was still so innocent. Yeah. I didn't know anything. And, so I called my dad and I was just like, you have to come get me. And by this point he was remarried. And so I begged him to come get me and he did. And I went and lived with my dad for about 3 months before that turned upside down. So
Girl.
that was the timeline.
Girl.
Yeah.
So much. It's just a lot to unravel. Before we get into your escape and how you just distance yourself from all of this, is there anything else that you want to speak to in any of the training centers or Africa, any of those things that you were part of?
Oh, I mean, I could go on for days about what happened at the training centers. For example, when I was 17 living at Eagle Springs, which previously was Elms, we went to Big Sandy, Texas, where IBLP had its International Alert Academy, which is like a paramilitary group for young men. The boys would come in and go through a basic training, which was ran by former Marine and Army drill sergeants. So it was literally, apparently it was on the level of a Marine basic training, but without the guns. They were quite literally trying to create a small army within the program. Like they had the uniforms, they had like the badges and the rank system and all that stuff. So we went there to work. And at the time it was like, oh, handsome boys in uniform. Looking back, I'm like, what was going on there? Why were they hiring and recruiting into the program military personnel and then training hundreds and hundreds and maybe thousands and thousands of young men in military style basic training and then utilizing them within the program like they were military?
Yeah.
The only thing they didn't have was guns that separated them from being military.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And so that's where it was overheard that someone thought I was pretty and I wasn't allowed to speak anymore. So, because I was a Jezebel. And so that was a pretty miserable experience in general.
Yeah. So I guess I do want to hear more about Africa, even though I was going to just get into the other thing. We've been talking for a while, but I just got to know, because I think that's a big part of your story of starting to unlock things within your brain to help you realize what's going on is not okay. So just lay it on me. Like, tell me what happened. Why were you there? And what were the specific things that got you to start waking up?
Well, I went with a program called Teen Missions out of Cocoa Beach, Florida. I don't know if you've ever heard of them. They work with a lot of really conservative people. And a lot of people from ATI had actually gone with Teen Missions and stuff. And one of the women that I knew from the Dallas Training Center was actually leading a team going to Africa. Her team was full. So I was like, all right, well, I'll go, with another one, whatever. And honestly, like, I'm so grateful that I did not end up on her team, because on that trip was the moment that I realized, like, you can be a Christian and not live like this. Like, these are normal people. Like, they would sing, a country song or a pop song, and I had no idea what it was. But then they were all like, they were so much happier and content in their faith than I was. They did not seem miserable. They weren't on edge. I remember anytime I went anywhere, I would be sick for 3 or 4 days before I went home because I was dreading being home so much. And these kids were not like that. They had male-female friendships, and it was normal. It never, that was so just not allowed. And when I started seeing literally, I guess how the other side lived, and I just realized, I can't do this anymore. I can't. And after I hadn't lived at home for a year at that point anyway. And even though I was back in the quote unquote discipleship program, I was not considered a troubled youth, because by this point they'd kind of figured out my mom was insane. And so they treated me a little bit different. So I had a lot more autonomy even within the program. I mean, looking back, it's not really autonomy, but for me at the time it was. And so then when I went to Africa with these other teenagers who had lived so much fuller lives than me, liked their parents, got along with their siblings, weren't terrified of failing, it just made me realize I could not go back. The whole flight home, I journaled about how much I dreaded going home, how much I would rather literally end up anywhere than back in my own home.
Oh, no. And at this point, you were living with your dad, right?
No, I was still technically living with my mom. That's the incident of me coming home is what led me living with my dad.
Oh, that's right. With the sleeveless shirt.
Well, she picked me up from the airport and I had on a thumb ring. That was the first big, like, she told me that I only wore thumb rings because I wanted male attention because I was a Jezebel. Thumb rings, just so you know, major stumbling block for men. Huge, apparently.
Huge.
And I had on a different pair of jeans than she had sent me with because I went from 145 pounds to 117 pounds while I was in Africa.
Oh, wow.
The water did not agree with me. I was very sick the whole time I was there. So I came home wearing a pair of bootcut jeans, and she was wildly against bootcut. She said that they were meant to distract and only make the female figure look more salacious. So, but I had to borrow a pair of pants because the pants I took literally would not stay on me. So that started the initial issue. And then, I spent a couple days with my dad immediately. Like, I think that day, maybe he met me or something. I'm not really sure. I can't remember the exact details, but, he and my stepmom met me and they took me shopping and stuff. They didn't have any clothes that fit because obviously I'd lost 30 pounds in 6 weeks. And when I came home after having spent that couple days with my dad, I hadn't been actually home yet, like to my house yet. They had met us in Atlanta. And when I came home wearing that sleeveless shirt and a pair of like, you remember back when like the black dress pants and like a cute top were like really in style for girls? Like that was like the cute thing to wear. That's what I had on. Just a pair of like black like office pants and a sleeveless like sweater thing, you know, because it was really cute at 19.
Yeah.
But that's when she lost it because it was sleeveless. She really didn't ever let me wear anything that flattered my body. So it was just like a big no.
So then at what point were you able to start distancing yourself from all of this? Because you went to live with your dad and you said that didn't turn out well. Did you have to just eventually go out on your own and try and figure it all out?
Well, shortly after moving in, I'm not really sure, but my stepmom went from telling people I was her daughter to wanting me out of the house. And I was just working a little retail job, trying to figure out life. I was at 19 years old, I decided my own haircut for the first time in my life at 19. I had my own email address for the first time at 19. Yeah. And I got a car. And I was literally experiencing like freshman year of high school style freedoms that I had never had in my life, but I was 19. And so in my mind, I was like, well, I'm an adult. In their mind, like, they're like, no, you're a child. So there was a lot of clashing there because I was trying to figure out how to live, and they are by nature extremely controlling people. It's one of the reasons my mom and dad didn't work out, ironically enough. But she decided that I was on drugs, and they called the police on me and had me escorted out of their house.
Oh my gosh.
I'd never even seen a drug at this point. I begged them for a drug test. I was like, I'll do one right now.
Yeah.
Like, I'll do it right now. They called the police on me and had me escorted out of their house 3 months in. And during this time, my mother was not speaking to me because the Lord had told her not to.
Oh, geez. So what did you do?
I moved in with a girl that I met at my first restaurant job. I don't know if you've ever worked in the restaurant industry, but you will learn a lot in a very short amount of time working in a restaurant. And I went and moved in with this girl who was a hardcore partier. I didn't know it. Her boyfriend was selling drugs. They were doing drugs. I had no idea because I didn't know anything. Yeah. Like, I thought I was being wild the first time I cracked open a beer. I was like, I'm crazy now. And they're in the bathroom doing lines and I don't even know because I have no idea. Like, I was so innocent.
Yeah.
Like, I remember my first beer. It tasted terrible. But they were like, you need to drink this. You're really emotional. I was like, oh, my dad kicked me out.
Oh, my God.
You know.
Yeah, I could totally relate to that. Just being completely naive to all things drugs and alcohol. And I still don't drink alcohol. It's just like not my thing. But yeah, I totally know. And you feel dumb like when people talk about certain things and like pop culture references, for example. I definitely was not as sheltered as you were as far as no worldly music at all or TV and movies, but there was definitely a hard limit to certain things. So I feel like pop culture wise, sometimes I still just look like a deer in the headlights and I just nod and pretend I know what they're talking about. Like, it feels so
I get that
dumb.
too. Like with late 90s, very early 2000s stuff,
Yeah.
like, and well, pretty much anything before that. I'm like, a classic rock song come on. They'd be like, you don't know who this is? I'm like, no, I don't. I lived under a rock till I was 19. I have no idea.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that must have been a huge shock. And I think the ironic part about all of this is that these caretakers who are supposed to be your caretakers are so paranoid that you're doing all of these bad things that they shove you out of safety and into harm's way, into the home with the drugs.
Yes.
And it's just so backwards that they're supposed to be the ones protecting you, and it's just not happening.
You know, and I think one of the most harmful things for me that came out of it was I had been taught you are either this way, like that way of thinking, the IBLP, Bill Gothard, all that way of thinking, or you are worldly and sinful.
Yes.
So when I left that way of thinking, I was like, well, there's no hope for me now. So I started being quite worldly and quite sinful. And it was 5 or 6 years of some pretty intense self-destruction because in my mind, I was like, well, I'm already ruined. It doesn't matter anymore. I'm already ruined. I had no idea that there was a balance. I had no idea that you could be someone that has a couple of drinks without being a party drinker. I had no idea that you could be someone who sleeps with someone they're in a monogamous relationship without being an actual whore.
Yeah.
So I was just doing whatever came my way because I was like, I'm already ruined. I'm already tarnished. It doesn't matter anymore. There was no concept of balance whatsoever. It was either you are this way, godly and holy, or you are a Jezebel sinner whore.
Yeah.
So I did not understand any kind of limitations or limits on that. And like I said, my early 20s were a train wreck. I mean, I was coping with trauma and, whatever, but.
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, there's so much to unpack with what you went through, not only with the abusive parent, but then the abuse in the centers and the exploitation and the manipulation and the mind control. I mean, the list goes on. And I'm not saying this to like freak you out or anything. It's just like when you really take a look at it, of course it's going to be difficult. Of course you're going to overcorrect. Like, I just hope that you give yourself grace and know that it's okay that happened too, because you weren't prepared. No one told you how to be. No. And that's what's so hard about these high control groups is they have this insane us versus them mentality, which demonizes anyone on the outside. So first of all, you're so afraid to leave. But then once you do leave, like you said, you don't even know how to be a normal person. And and not only do you assume you're a bad person, but you have the people who are still on the inside telling you that you're a bad person and you need to come back to Christ, or you need to come back to the group, or whatever it is that they're trying to suck you back into, without just giving you the tools to be a productive member of society who is living a healthy balance. It's impossible. And that's why I love bringing people on like you to tell your stories and show that, yes, you can leave and it's hard and you may overcorrect, but in the end, we're doing our best and you're happier now. I mean, hopefully we're going to get to that part in a second, but you're a success story ultimately of what it can look like if you really just push through it, and to also help people understand that there are resources out there that can help you transition out of these things. And there are people who want to help. And so just learning how to ask for help is also something that we need to learn how to do, because there's so much shame that comes with leaving these groups. And it's really hard to open up to people and say, yeah, this thing happened to me, I need help, because you've been taught to feel ashamed about it.
And I was so entrenched in the Christian faith that it just never occurred to me until I left the faith entirely that I had been done wrong. I really genuinely believed the whole time the problem was me. Even when I went to the Excel program in Dallas, Texas, which is kind of like their etiquette / finishing school, I remember when my mother showed up people kept telling her how much fun I was and how funny they thought I was and how fun they thought I was. And I remember her looking at me, so sad. She was like, wow, everyone always says you're fun, but no one ever says how sweet you are or how caring you are or how helpful you are. Being fun is not important.
Oh.
Yeah. And so that was the theme of my life, you know, and I just did not see it for what it was for so many years. I just decided that I was the rebel and that, you know what, right or wrong, I was out.
Yeah.
And it just never occurred to me that they were the ones that were wrong.
Yeah. So I'd love for you to talk about how you're doing now. And if you want to talk about that transition out of Christianity, you can as well. I just want to give you the floor to kind of let everyone know what your consciousness side of the story is, what makes you feel happy and whole and complete and in control of yourself.
Well, I have a daughter now and she's 8 and she's growing up without purity culture.
Yay!
So that's a huge win. There are no modesty teachings, although sometimes I wish I'd taught her a little bit. I'm like, all right, you're 8. You cannot run around like this all the time. We live in the middle of town. Yeah. These windows are here.
Yeah.
But, you know, so it's been really interesting trying to navigate parenthood without all of the toxic disciplinary and stuff like that, because I really wanted a gentle parent, but everything I knew was abuse, was hitting, was yelling, was screaming. And so it's been such a learning challenge for me on how to effectively parent without being abusive.
Right.
And, you know, I do yell sometimes, and then I sit and I just tear myself up about it because I do lose my temper and I do yell. But, you know, but then I remember, you know, when I was 8 years old, I was being pushed to the ground and kicked and screamed at and stuff like that. And my daughter's not experiencing that. So at least, you know, we're breaking the patterns. Yeah. We're breaking the patterns. But, you know, mental health wise, like I deal with severe depression and anxiety. It's just part of it. I have CPTSD. And a lot of times those symptoms can even mimic what being on the autism spectrum is like. So, you know, for a while, for about the first 5 years after my daughter was born, I was non-functioning. I kept her alive, and that is all that I did. I just literally had no other capacity. And I've had, you know, really no support from family. And I don't have, you know, I have 1 or 2 people that I call friends. But when you are not allowed to make friends growing up, you know, people in their 30s aren't necessarily out here looking to establish new BFFs,
right?
You know, and that's really, really difficult to do. And I wasn't allowed to have friends. I wasn't even allowed to go to the Sunday school group for my age kind of thing. I had to go to my mom's Sunday school class with her because she didn't want anyone to influence me other than her. My perception of self is dramatically better than it ever has been in the last couple of years because I've started working through the trauma. Once I realized how significant the trauma was, I did start trying to do the work on it. You know, therapy is crazy expensive. So I haven't been able to really pursue that in the way that I would like to.
Yeah.
But I hope at some point I can find a trauma-informed therapist that would like to unravel this mess with me.
Right.
But I think, and, you know, and I have moved entirely away from the Christian faith and I'm not raising my daughter in it. She was around my mom some and in church a little bit. And then the nightmares about hell started.
Yeah.
And I was just like, absolutely not. We're not doing this again. So there is no contact whatsoever in church. And I went no contact entirely with my mother last fall. She has deliberately sabotaged almost every good thing that has tried to come into my life through lies, which she will never own. She will never admit. She says that I'm lying about them, but you know, she entirely alienated me from my biological family and my father's family, my adopted father's family, and just destroyed any possibility of relationships with both of them. And I didn't know about it until last fall.
Oh,
and I told her,
wow.
I was just like, I am done. I'm done. I can't do this anymore. Like you have no love for me whatsoever, and I can't trust you with my child. So there's no reason for us to speak. So
yeah, I think that was a really beautiful thing that you were able to bring yourself to do, which is not easy in setting those boundaries and making yourself a priority and your child a priority. I think that's so important. And it speaks to who you are now, because I think the little you back in the day wouldn't have been able to establish a boundary like that. And so I'm really proud that you've been able to do that for yourself and for your family. And I'm so happy at how far that you've come, and I know that it's a constant journey. We're never going to be completely fixed, or I mean, fix is the wrong word because we're not broken. We're never going to be completely untangled.
Maybe a little bit broken.
No, Jess, no. We're just...
Don't you remember? Do you remember the analogies of the potter, like where they filled the cracks in with gold?
Yeah.
I like to think of that.
Yeah,
but,
we're just breaking down and building up in new ways. And so it takes time. It's always going to be a process. And if I may insert a non-sponsored ad, I guess, for BetterHelp, that's what I ended up using because it was really affordable and you have weekly access to your therapist, like just through texting. And so highly recommend
that. Would be phenomenal.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's where, I mean, I've had a positive experience with it so far. And so, yeah, I guess it's just something to look into if you're interested in that. But thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. And
thank you for having me.
Yeah, and being vulnerable and telling all the hard things and being a shining light for people, an example of how you can get out and you can face those hard things and set boundaries and become a productive member of society and inspire and just, everything. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah. So I need your Linda listen moment as that viral video with the toddler goes arguing his sassy words.
Listen, Linda.
Give it to me.
I say, listen, Linda, don't send your kids to camps to improve their behavior. Conversion camps, wilderness camps, troubled teen camps. They are just ruses for horrific abuse, child labor, and in many places, actual, physical, sexual trafficking and stuff like that.
Yeah. Amen.
Also, don't homeschool your children with the intention of raising Christian nationalists either. Right. There's that too. That was a huge emphasis in there, was the politics. Politics were a huge emphasis within ATI. So.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, we didn't even really dive into the homeschooling thing. That's a whole nother episode.
There are so many layers to that organization.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Well, thank you again. It's been amazing. Everyone, if you want to go follow Jess, you can go to her TikTok, Jess is Serious, and I'll put the link in the description below. And if you want to support the podcast, that would mean a lot. You can like, subscribe, and share, and comment. Send some support out to Jess here. Your words of encouragement always mean a lot. And if you want to become a patron, you can go to patreon.com/cults2consciousness. I have to say thank you to my new patrons, Marie, Dan, Josephina, and Specker. Thank you so much for your support. And if you like this video, I will put a few videos here that you can watch that you will definitely want to see. And until next time, follow your highest excitement, be conscious, and be well.